Hello, I'm John, the Carnivore teacher, and I have a very special guest to introduce to you today. Meet Christopher P. Brandlin, Esquire, MBA, DTR, also known as the Carnivore Lawyer, a licensed attorney in California and Texas, AV preeminent, rated, and admitted to the Supreme Court of the United States. Chris is running for the U.S. House of Representatives with one clear mission: to protect our freedoms and restore the health of our nation. With over 2 decades of legal service, a background in fitness, and advanced degrees, including an MBA and a PhD in public policy in progress, Chris offers more than just political promise. He offers real-world solutions. As a former competitive bodybuilder, personal trainer, registered dietetic technician, and someone who personally overcame major health setbacks through metabolic healing and the carnivore diet, he brings both passion and firsthand insight to the table. Chris knows our healthcare system is broken. Americans are over-medicated, underinformed, and treated like lifelong customers instead of patients to be healed. He's witnessed this decline and lived it, and he's determined to change it. His platform focuses on rebuilding America's health, supporting farmers and real food, restoring traditional values, and protecting the next generation with strong, science-backed public policy. In short, Chris Brandlin is not just another politician, he's the alternative we need. A fighter, a reformer, and a proud American who's ready to restore America's health. Welcome, Chris.
Wow, John, that's one of the most detailed introductions I've ever got. I should probably hire you to do my introduction. That's awesome.
How was the information in there?
That's perfect. I can tell you have an educational background too. So.
Accurate. Okay. Yeah, I was a teacher.
Yeah, exactly. So.
Well, great.
Well, thank you for having me on your show.
It's an honor to have you, Chris. Absolutely. So let's start with your personal journey and your motivation. What personal experiences made you realize that America's health system is failing its people?
Firsthand knowledge, just my personal experience from 2016. As you probably heard from some of my prior podcasts, I came from the health industry as a personal trainer and all-natural bodybuilder and a triathlete before becoming an attorney. So I used that when I was in college and law school. So I never had to go to the doctors when I was sick. To be honest with you, I never really got sick. I may have had a few hangovers from college from my party days, of course. I think a lot of us have those occasionally. But anyways, I never went for not feeling well. And that was the most concerning. So about 5 years after practicing law, I was still staying in relatively good shape, but I'm not sure what really provoked this. Some believe it was Lyme and some co-infections. Some, and I actually still believe maybe it's just a lot of distress, not eustress, because as you may know, John, there's a difference between good stress and bad stress in life. I think training hard and, personal training 12 hours a day with a lot of people that you love, that's I call that eustress. That's good stress, because it's good stress in the body and you're making changes. But distress is practicing law. A lot of things you really don't want to deal with. A lot of people you don't want to deal with, unfortunately. So anyways, I started feeling very sick when I was waking up, and I used to be a morning workout junkie, 4 or 5 in the morning, wake up and do a full workout and then do it the whole day. And I was having trouble waking up because I was waking up in a lot of pain, and it was primarily just gut discomfort, but it was also the whole umbrella of autoimmune problems. It was fibromyalgia. It was chronic fatigue syndrome. It's just constant brain fog. I'm like, what the heck is going on with me? I feel like I've just been drugged up. And I was almost checked to see if someone was putting some roofies in my water at work or something. What's going on? Wow. Anyways, so when I actually went to the doctor, and that's where I made one of the first mistakes, is because I never went to doctor. I used to go to doctors just for stitches, broken bones, because I've had plenty of those, but never because I'm not feeling well. So it's kind of embarrassing. But when I went to the doctor, I've already saw that, they were really jumping over to certain protocols without really kind of gathering a lot of information. And I was already suspecting something, because when I told them I'm having a wide set of problems, but mainly I'm having a lot of gut discomfort, not gut pain, just discomfort, bloating, because it can't break down a lot of fibrous foods and vegetables anymore. They said, okay, you got a gut infection. We're going to give you some antibiotics, and we're going to give you some prescriptive medications. and you're just going to do a trial and it's going to be cleared out. And that was his exact words. This is over here in California. Like in 2016 was when I first went to the doctor. And that's where I say I became a routine customer, not a routine patient, because it just seems that without even really asking about the details of my problems or diagnosing or even doing some blood tests or even stool tests, they just put me on a load of antibiotics, laxatives, and corticosteroids. And I believe those are a combination for disaster in your intestines. Let's just say that. And so instead of just, getting off of them, they seem like to rotate. I was taking different antibiotics, different laxatives. It was osmotics, but a lot of them was like, stimulant laxatives, which could be very dangerous, as I learned too. And it got to a point about a year later, I got so inflamed in my intestines. And this is where the gut inflammation went to gut pain. The gut discomfort went to gut pain because it was just truly inflamed. I just could not even walk. I was just like, God, I had to do some intermittent fasting occasionally, just not out of my knowledge of fasting, just because I just didn't want to eat. I just was feeling so in pain. And it got to a point where they referred me to a colorectal surgeon who says, okay, you got this, did like a colonoscopy, different scans. It's like, this piece of your intestine is really inflamed. I think if we just remove this, you're going to feel 10 times better. And I was so desperate and gullible at the time. And, I wanted to get my social life and my dating life back, and I just wasn't hanging out with friends, and I was just kind of cutting myself off the face of the earth. And I was like, I need to have my social life back. Let's just get it over. If you promise I'm going to be a lot better, let's just do it. And that's where I put even more faith in medicine, and it became even a worse disaster. So, as I mentioned this in prior podcasts, like the first thing that I recognized, which was a disaster, was just the fact that I actually woke up during the surgery.
Oh.
That I'm not sure if they had a problem with anesthesia or something, but I woke up while they were sewing up my intestines. I just remember I was in the operating room, and I woke up, and all of a sudden I just started screaming because the top of my lungs, and they had to basically put me, I think it was like tramadol or morphine. They had to really sedate me, and they had to put a high dosage because they didn't expect me to wake up. And then I was just drugged up for the next couple of days and just a lot of discomfort in the hospital. This was in Orange County, California. And then, they're like, all right, we're going to be releasing you. I'm like, because I was there for 2 days. I think it was April 18th till April 20th. I got on 420 in 2017. And I remember I was like, I want to make sure this thing's working. Like, I want to make sure my intestines are working before you completely just release me. I just don't want to have any complications or blockages. And they're like, no, you're going to be fine. Stop worrying about it. Just go home. It was a successful surgery. I'm like, that's a successful surgery. You didn't even keep me sedated. It was, so anyways, I just started having a lot of spasms and pain for the next couple of weeks. I was still having some motility, but it was still getting stuck. And because of my intestines were so inflamed, it was mainly a laparoscopic surgery. As you know, John, a laparoscopic is minor incisions, mainly invasive, but they always have one larger cut, usually in a laparoscopic surgery, and they call that the anastomosis site if they do a resection of your intestines. So basically, they removed a piece of my sigmoid intestine, which is one of the last pieces of your intestine right before it goes to the end, and they attached the descending colon over to the top of the rectum, which is 2 inches below my belly button. Anyways, but a couple of weeks later, it started getting swollen at the anastomosis site, the main incision area, which was 2 inches below my belly button, and it just started getting bigger and bigger. And I took some photos, and I went to a quick follow-up about a week or two later, and the physician's assistant said, oh, it's just a hematoma. Don't worry about it. You're always worried about it. Your anxiety is going to kill you more than anything. Don't worry about it. And I was like, okay, fine. I just went home, and then 2 days later, it tripled up in size to the size of a grapefruit. And I gave the analogy, it's almost like the movie The Alien from the 80s.
Oh my gosh.
Where it's the aliens popping out of the guy's stomach. It was like that. It was but 2 inches below my belly button, which was right over your pelvis. Very uncomfortable. But right when I sent the photos to the surgeon, they had to get me to the ER immediately. So get to the ER, you got a major infection. We got to cut that open, and we got to drain the infection out. So, and they didn't have any time to give me an anesthesia, so I was fully awake while they did the incision with the scalpel. They injected some lidocaine, but it didn't really do SHIT, John. So anyways, I just remember I wanted to stay still because I really didn't want them to screw it up. So I was just grasping for my life and biting my tongue. And I actually gave the point that I was bleeding from my mouth because I was in so much pain when they had to recut me open. They said it was mainly superficial, but I felt the entire thing, and they had to go very deep because the infection got really deep. I thought they're going to sew it back up, and then the doctor says, no, last time, we got an infection from the inside, and if we just sew this back up with all that moisture, you're going to have a breeding ground for an infection because, it's very, we got out most of the infection, but maybe not all. We can't really do, all that. So we're going to have to change the gauze. So basically I had to I called Anthony Shaffer. It was it looked like a vagina 2 inches below my belly button because it was like a hole, like a sideways, like going like at the same level as like my belly button. And basically I had to take gauze and stuff it in there and then cover it up with another band, like a thick bandage. I had to make sure I didn't get any water in it, and then I had to change the gauze 3 times a day, morning, afternoon, evening. I did that for a couple of weeks. The infection still came back. And I went back to the doctor. They had to do the same thing a couple of weeks later.
Oh.
So I'm like, oh my God. And then I just woke up. I was like, I just ruined my life by listening to conventional doctors. I should have never had this surgery because the more and more I started looking into it, I was like, well, this wasn't right. Why are they giving me this? Why did this? Like, why I'm having those? And then I was almost considering a malpractice action, but between you and I, John, the surgeon, it was actually he was basically a friend of a friend, and of another attorney, and I didn't want everybody to know, hey, don't refer him anybody. He's just going to sue your neighbors, basically. So I and not just that, some of them said you signed so many waivers that it's always construed against the patient. I started doing medical malpractice after this, but anyways, I went back to the doctor and I was keeping the infection nominal. It was still inflamed, but I started just kind of doing an elimination diet. And I was learning okay, I can't even do any nuts and seeds. Even if it's blended, I don't even trust a nut butter at this point. I'm just doing slow cooked foods. Anyways, the surgeon had the nerve to tell me, I don't think since you're still having problems, I think we need to remove all of your intestines. And that's where I just really slammed the table and just gave him the middle finger. I was like, you ruined my life. There's no way. I'm going to do some extensive testing because I think something's, you guys were never treating the root cause. Something's wrong with me. And that's where I actually did some blood tests, and all of them confirmed some Lyme disease and co-infections as Babesia and Bartonella. But I don't think the Lyme and the co-infections really caused this huge issue. I think it was just because it was amazing. When I was having discomfort, it was coming and going. But right when I started going on this prescriptive medication, these pharmaceuticals, these laxatives, antibiotics, and corticosteroids, my immune system just went to crap. And everything, it just got so much worse. When I was having, I regret ever going to the doctor because I think if I looked outside the box and maybe just learned about carnivore or some fasting or some other techniques or hyperbaric oxygen therapy, ozone therapy, all these different adjuncts, I think I probably could have kept the Lyme and co-infections in remission, but I made it worse. So anyways, so I decided to do a fast because the infection was kind of staying away, but it still was very sensitive, and I didn't want to lose the rest of my intestines. So the end of 2017, I decided to do an extended water fast because I've always done 2 or 3 days at a time, never something extensive. And I actually went to fasting clinics, John. I'm not sure if you know, but most of the fasting clinics in the United States are run by vegans. That's what I'm trying to propose. Hey, we're gonna have some carnivore fat because fasting can be incredible so long as you have the proper refeed and refeed on insoluble fiber. It's like putting sandpaper in your intestines just right after you kind of left the intestines alone for a couple of days. So I was realizing I felt better in a fast, but I always felt worse after fast. Let me change it up. I'm not gonna go to a vegan clinic. I'm gonna fast and I'm gonna take some time off of work. I'm going to refeed on a slow-cooked steak. And I did this because I was looking into the GAPS diet. I'm sure you probably heard of it. It's the Gut and Psychology Syndrome diet. And it's by Dr. Natasha McCampbell-McBride or something similar to that effect. But anyways, the main focus is just bone broth is elimination diet. Bone broth is always kind of the starting scratch, the healing component. Even though I was having some histamine issues with bone broth, I was like, you know what? It seems like they're I was looking at the book and they were saying don't introduce these vegetables, just stick with meat and meat broth. Like meat seems like it's the standard, like the base. Let me just focus on that. And when I did the fast, I refed on the meat. It was so amazing on how much better I felt.
Wow.
In a couple of days, I was like, you know what? I've never felt this good after a fast. Something's to it. So I started putting the pieces of the puzzle together. And then I spoke with some friends, because most of my true friends are from the fitness industry. I'll make this a public statement. I hate most attorneys, to be honest with you. And for many different reasons. But anyways, a lot of my friends are like, they're still operating their own gyms. And we were all 24-hour fitness together in like 2005. And a lot of them went to my little meetup a couple of weeks ago too. But so I'm still friends with them. Those are my true close friends. And they're like, you know what, Chris, you probably got to just eat only meat. It sounds like you're only doing well with meat. There's some people that eat only meat. And I think that's called a carnivore diet or something. And that's where I was in 2018, like starting, I was like, all right, let me look into this. And then I started following Michaela Peterson. I did a phone call with her, and then I followed up with Dr. Baker right before he became very popular. I did a Skype with him.
Mm-hmm.
And then I decided that I need to just get myself away from society and just do something more kind of one-on-one. So I read up about the Paleo Menacida Clinic in Budapest, Hungary, run by Dr. Sophia Clemens. This is when she was with Dr. Sabatat at the time. But anyways, I realized that they were one of the few groups that did like clinical trials on putting so many conditions in remission with a ketogenic animal-based diet. And I was just so amazed when I was looking at them. I was like, you know what? I Skyped with them. They were so friendly. I decided to go over there at Budapest Thanksgiving 2018. And I remember the biggest change was I was always taking a little bit of supplements, some multivitamins or some from vitamin D when my D levels dropped down, or something else to that extent, or maybe even sometimes electrolytes. I would take like extra potassium or something like that. But she made it very clear. She's like, no supplements, no prescriptive medication, nothing. Meat, salt, and water, and you're going to be eating a lot of fat with your meat, by the way, too. And it was all animal-based fat. And she said you won't have to worry about motility at all. Because I was like, I still have these strictures from the scar tissue. Sometimes I have to take some. I don't like taking a lot of stimulant laxatives, but maybe I have to take a lot of high dose of magnesium or something like that. And she's like, no, nothing. She's like, you're going to have plenty of fat. You're not going to have to worry about motility. And she was completely right. Because this is where I went really high fat diet. And not only does, if you jump into it too soon, it's a little uncomfortable. But I was amazed. I was like, I didn't have to take anything. My gut's working. This is the easiest thing, because if I got blocked up, I'll just eat extra fat. And if I'm running too fat, I just reduce my fat. I started moderating. I was like, this is the simplest thing. This is amazing. And I felt amazing when I came back to the United States. So I really wanted to make it well known, because before this, is you probably experienced, John, is that a lot of people were demonizing meat. We're told by, and all these institutions telling you that meat causes cancer, cardiovascular disease, it's going to be making you obese. And then I was like, no, meat saved my life. I'm actually getting back into shape. I'm feeling amazing. And more people should know about this. This is a lot of false propaganda. So I already had a DTR, the Dietetic Technician, registered. I decided that I wanted to get a master's in dietetics. So when I told USC I wanted to get the master's, the highest level of dietetics, they said, well, yeah, you're an interesting character. You're licensed in a couple of different states as an attorney. You got a decent background, but what do you really want to do? I was like, you guys need to flip the food pyramid upside down. Yeah. You guys should not be demonizing meat. They definitely did not like that response. So they said, you're not a good candidate because you're a bad influence. And I was like, yeah, fine. So I got my MBA, but I actually decided to run for Congress because I didn't like when they're trying to enforce government mandated healthcare on the American public involuntarily. I mean, basically unilaterally, they'll try to force it on the public. And whether someone wants to be a sheep, I call them a sheep, but yeah, if you want to just jump to every vaccine they propose to you, that's your own choice. But when you're trying to force it on government employees and healthcare workers, which a lot of my friends are healthcare workers, because a lot of the trainers from 24-Hour Fitness went into healthcare afterwards. And I really suck out. And then when people try to report me to the state bar for speaking out against the vaccines and a lot of these lockdowns, I wasn't even talking about the health consequences. I was talking about the ethical consequences. I'm like, are you really going to be restricting their freedoms and actually ignoring any kind of exemptions, such as they have religious, or they'll have a medical exemption that it could be contraindicated with a certain type of condition? They were actually threatening some of because I represent doctors too. They're actually reprimanding some of my own doctor clients because they wrote a medical exemption for a LA firefighter to not get vaccinated because it could be contraindicated with one of his conditions. And they threatened to take away his license just because he wrote an honest medical exemption. Then I knew that we needed someone to voice their concerns at higher levels. And I was like, let me get my PhD in public policy, because I just kind of learned that a lot of politicians are either attorneys or they got a background in public policy. Let me get both. So maybe I'll be the younger candidate because I just turned 40, because a lot of them were like 50s and 60s. I'm like, but I think I'm going to have a lot better kind of background on diversity. And I think I have a better approach that's going to actually be more tailored to the American public. And that's what I made that decision in 2021. And I'm just finalizing I'm waiting for my final oral defense of my dissertation stage, because I submitted my analysis of my interviews. I'm doing qualitative research. And all, as you may know, a PhD is kind of a research doctor. We're not a medical doctor, but we were mainly kind of focused on how to comprise and distinguish and kind of analyze research on whether it can be used for any kind of policy or any kind of health changes too. That's why I was going to promote that. But yeah, and that's still my move, and that's where I'm aiming. So I'm running for the House of Representatives in the 3rd District of Nevada for the November 2026 midterms.
You answered the next 5 questions. I had to scroll down. So what do I ask him next? You answered all the questions. That is amazing. And just to summarize for you, and I agree with you, and Dr. Chafee has taught me this and so many others, that it's so simple. It's so simple. If we just remove the irritants, if we remove the toxins, and we eat what we're supposed to eat, our ancestral diet, our body has a chance to heal. And everything you just said, that's just it's so simple. Just remove what we're not supposed to have, and we heal. Isn't that amazing?
It is. And I think a lot of people really overthink it.
Exactly.
Calorie counting and macros. No, I was like, you know what? And not just that, a lot of people are trying to find out why the rise in our mental health issues are coming about, especially with children, as you probably saw some of my reels. I'm like, people don't realize that. I actually think it's pharmaceuticals and bad food, but certain doctors are like, oh, it's just the food. I'm like, no, pharmaceuticals really screw you up mentally. Okay, whatever you put in your system, whether you're consuming it by, to eat or consuming any kind of medication, it's gonna affect your brain. I can guarantee you right now, because your brain is part of your body, and everything that you eat affects your entire body.
Everything has a side effect, and every medicine interacts with every other medicine, and everybody's body chemistry differently. It gets very complicated. You're so right. Yeah. All right. That brings me to this question. You've said that the current national guidelines are making Americans sicker. What specific changes would you advocate for in Congress if you're elected?
Well, first of all, we shouldn't be putting a limitation on 2 ounces of meat per day. That's kind of the limitation. Well, the CDC follows kind of certain guidelines, and they do the National Institute of Health, and they basically say in 2 ounces. And I'm like, this is why. And not only a lot of people are overweight, but you realize that you could actually be overweight and malnourished at the same time.
Yeah.
And you're not properly feeding yourself. And I'm just seeing that a lot of people are just so weak, but they're also overweight. But yeah, it's something we've been eating for 2.5 million years, and more research I looked into it. And this is when just as you probably did, John, is when you feel better after something, you get really intriguing into it. And that's why, law is kind of natural. I'll be honest with you. Law is something that's simplified in my family, just because I have a father and uncles who are attorneys and a judge, retired judge. And I kind of learned about the law in my entire life, just because when I was 5 years old, I used to hear my father kind of dictating a summary for a deposition or something like that, or going back in court. But, when you find an area of life that you really find inspiring, that actually motivates you or gives you more of a passion, you'll find that more intriguing. And then that's why I even told my father that I was like, I'm not sure if I made the right choice by going to, this is before I got sick, by becoming an attorney. This is right after I passed the bar exam in 2011, because I had the best times of my life as a fitness trainer, even when I was partying. But it wasn't just that, just because I had the really good environment, social environment, because hanging around a bunch of attorneys is not the most positive environment versus hanging around a bunch of trainers that like doing stunts and tricks and like to compete, or basically we'll see who can do a handstand push-up while drinking shots at the tequila bar or something. But anyways, I was like, I'm not sure if I made the right change by going to but my father did make one point. He's like, as an attorney, this is right when the market was kind of fluctuating, because I
Uh-huh.
actually went to law school because the market crashed, by the way.
Oh,
Yeah, because there's no jobs. I graduated from Cal State Long Beach 2007, and I actually went to law school because I was a fraternity president. I was partying when I told my father I think about becoming an attorney. He called me like the skinny version of John Belushi. He's like, you gotta sober up to get into law school. You know that. He's like, I'd like to see you try. So that was actually my motivation to prove him wrong. So I got into, but he made a very good point. He's like, people are always going to have so many problems. As an attorney, you have job security for life. And I think that was the most accurate statement. I mean, even when I don't want clients, I get clients sometimes. And I thought the lockdown was actually going to worsen my industry, but the legal industry like boomed, especially divorce attorneys. I didn't realize that. Yeah. Bankruptcy and family law attorneys did the best, because a lot of people filed for BK for different organizations even when the SBA loans weren't sufficient enough to put them back on track. And I confirm with a lot of my family law attorney friends is that right when spouses were forced to work together at home, for remote working, they kind of said like usually the spouses a small 6 to 8 hour gap in between seeing each other kind of like gives them enough space to kind of like look forward to seeing your spouse when you get home. Yeah. And now when you're stuck at home with it, like the smallest thing, it's almost like
sick of them.
Yeah, I know. It's almost like if I went on a road trip to New Orleans, Mardi Gras, and right before I started law school, to get everything out of my system but I should say put everything in your system, because you drink everything on Bourbon Street. But anyways, I just remember that like on the way home, like we all hated each other because we were stuck in the same car together for so long. I was like, it's got to be the same thing for a lot of spouses too.
That's the issue for sure.
Yeah,
absolutely. All right, let's switch over to
sure.
Seed oil, sugar, ultra processed food. What role do you know? I know you know this. Yeah. What role do they play in our national health crisis? I make videos every day, little short videos as a teacher. I have another shirt that says no seed oils, and it lists all the seed oils. I am constantly talking about it.
Yes, and I had to do extra work to make sure that my vendor for the Las Vegas meetup a few weeks ago did not have any seed oils on it too, because I had so many people inspired.
Good. But they're everywhere. They're everywhere. So how do we get this? All right, like our body can recognize carbohydrates and sugar. It knows what to do with them. Too much in excess obviously is not healthy.
It's not natural. It's way too processed, and it's used for engines.
Exactly. But seed oils were never meant to be in our human body. It's almost like drinking machine oil. So how do we get this crap out of the entire, it's not even just in the United States. This is a world problem, but we have the US, obviously. How would you do this? What would you say in Congress? How do you?
Because I don't think Bobby Kennedy is going to be doing a lot of work here, even though he's kind of starting to talk about tallow only and all that. But I'm not sure if you've also looked at, John, do you see the bulk amount of tallow that they're actually giving to a lot of these big restaurants? Like Steak and Shake was the main one that started.
Are they starting to give them who's giving?
Well, but look at the ingredients in the tallow. They're actually adding DHT and citric acid, which is a derivative of gold
or something.
Yeah, but they almost said it's almost like a flavor enhancer, like the DHT. Was it DHT or something? So
they're gonna basically bastardize what's healthy.
Yeah. Anything they can do in bulk to put some cheap ingredients or something like that.
Right.
But I think what's more concerning is there's a lot of state legislatures that are just trying to focus on. I did a reel on generally recognized as safe, and if it's within a certain limitation, you do not have to disclose it on a label, even if it has micro amounts. I'm like, but it's still going to be. If you put a little bit of cocaine in someone's drink, even if it's a small amount, I think that person has the right to know about it. So. I think that's going to be a huge concern of getting, because there hasn't been a huge approach to that to completely remove it from labels. And a lot of people don't realize that, as you may know, the 10th Amendment gives powers to the states that are not left to the federal government. Mm-hmm. We call it the state police powers. And health is always one of the big topics which should be left to the states. So there are certain states, such as Minnesota, where they're allowing a lot of ingredients to be put in a lot of foods without actually displaying it on the nutritional label or disclosing this. And what happens is this, the major issue is that when people try to look for the government, the USDA, the USDA and the government entities are actually leaving it to the companies to decide for themselves on whether it should be designated as generally recognized safe.
Right.
You're giving too much freedom to the corporations, and indirectly, this is taking away freedom from the American public. And this is why they're favoring Big C over all these hardworking, families. And this is where it becomes an issue. Another thing I think we need to make a focus in, they're not doing SHIT when it comes to sugar. And my client, Anthony Shafee, made a huge point about this. Look at my manager came from Team Kennedy. So I like what he's doing. And I think he's doing some great basic things. Okay. But when you're spending so much time saying, we're taking away all the artificial dyes out of Fruit Floops.
Right.
Yes, and it still has all the sugar and
right.
crap in it.
Right.
And people are like, oh my God, I'm gonna get lean again because I'm not eating any artificial dyes. I'm like, no. The problem is the problem is not there's artificial dyes in your Fruit Loops. The problem is you're eating Fruit Loops. People need to reset exactly what they're putting in the system.
And there's soybean oil in the Fruit Loops. Exactly. It's not just sugar. People don't know the cereals have these seed oils. Yeah.
And if it's for a certain amount, I'm going to go back to what Tom Rossi's kind of product, because he's talking about this too.
They don't have to list it.
Exactly. And sometimes it varies by the states, but we need to have something kind of like national that's going to be like, look at every state. If it doesn't want to make this a federal kind of rule, that's fine. But every state should acknowledge that you are obligated to put every ingredient, because when you try to say it's got a little bit less than 1%, we're going to be putting, I just like to use the terms cocaine. You're going to put a little bit of cocaine in it and no one goes away with it. You're right. Or put a little bit of fentanyl. Don't worry. It's less than 1%. You're not going to have any problems. That's where someone needs to put the foot down and put a little bit more scrutiny and probably investigations on what these companies are doing, because they're giving way too much free leverage. And as I also stated, John, and you're going to probably like the next reel that I'm going to put together, because I'm going to have to bash a few people from my own political party. So as you may know, pharmaceutical companies are the biggest donors of all of Congress, right? So people don't realize, like, oh yeah, some people from Congress, get funding from pharmaceutical companies. No, 2/3 of Congress, not just Democrats, Republicans too, a smaller amount, but still. And this is where, when some people are like, oh, you're getting paid off from Big Pharma and they're beat, I'm like, hey, you shouldn't be the one talking. You're actually doing the same crap. And this is where I'm not trying to cause a civil war like within my own party, but I'm like, guys, you cannot be hypocritical. You should not be accepting funding from some criminal, industries such as that, because the pharmaceutical companies, this is how they get money to a lot of politicians. It's never a direct payment, by the way. I mean, unless you're Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth kind of Warren kind of admitted to direct payments, but it's usually through political action committees, PACs or PACs, okay? And they are the main funders, and that's how it's kind of like it's almost like people when they're trying to I'm going to set up these corporations so it doesn't show that I'm earning this much money, but my corporations are having this much write-ups. They're doing something similar with political action committees. So basically, I think they said oh my God, it was how many $1 million went through. And it's not just the federal too. Let's say there's a lot of people, John, that said, hey, Chris, you're so much for people. Don't waste your time with federal. Stick with the states, because the state and local and smaller governments, this is where you'll actually be more in tune with and work in the local public, because you won't be so broad. And when it comes to federal, the scams get bigger and bigger, right? I mean, that's the general understanding. But the problem is state level campaigns are still funded by pharmaceutical companies. The same action. In fact, over 2,400 state level campaigns were funded by pharmaceutical companies. Even with Bobby Kennedy in office, I don't think it's making that much of a damn difference right now, because the industries is still controlling Congress. And based on what I've heard, he's not able to do what he really wants to do.
And, when he was elected and they put him in there, I knew, as wonderful as he's making the concepts come out, we're hearing no red dye number 3 or whatever. We're hearing these things and these little changes. I just knew in the back of my head, I'm like, big change is still not going to happen. It's just not going to happen. I can just see it. I can feel it. What would you do when you get in there? How can you affect bigger change?
Oh, I will. I'm going to plan on offending a lot of people within my party, both parties, but people need to stand out. And I think I'm going to actually really have to cold call and point people out on who's getting the funding and why it's not making a difference and why it should be limited. And
Good.
then I'm going to make also the same fact of the comparison of how much, what they're really doing for the American public too. And I make a huge comment that I do believe in term limits for a reason. I think there's some people that can serve a really long term and still serve the American people, regardless of the party, John. But there is a huge trend when it comes to a lot of people that are in office for a long period of time. And Byron Donalds made a very interesting point about this, is that when some people stay in Congress for too long, they realize that they get a lot of perks and benefits, so they stop thinking about the American people and they start focusing on themselves, and that's where it becomes sinister in behavior.
Wow. Yes, I totally agree. Let's switch to education. I'm a retired school teacher. I taught for 34 years, middle school students. I'm now teaching on YouTube about the carnivore diet and proper nutrition. You mentioned plummeting test scores in some of your past videos. How do you see health and nutrition impacting education outcomes?
Easily. I think I posted some studies about ketogenic diets actually improving cognitive function, not only for adolescents, but for also older individuals. I would like more studies on it because as you could probably understand, the people that fund, it's not cheap to fund a clinical study because you have to gather participants, you have to get like some kind of doctors and publishers, and you have to put some time and money into any clinical trial. But the government actually has a set of funds because our tax dollars are partially used for clinical studies that could show whether something's going to be serving the American public. The problem is, as you can see, who has the most control over the pharmaceutical companies are, and what they'll do is they'll pick a certain pharmaceutical and they will ignore a lot of the side effects and they'll focus on that. So I want to push for more clinical trials on ketogenic diets, almost putting almost every condition in remission without any pharmaceuticals. I want to make it clear that people can treat themselves and heal themselves with food only, with no pharmaceuticals, because I still think that if you're taking pharmaceutical medication, even on a proper human diet, as Dr. Ken Berry likes to say, is that you're still putting gasoline on the fire inside of there because it's still going to be, you're talking about like organ failure and all this, liver cirrhosis, all this. Almost every medication, it's hard to find any medication that has zero side effects. It's always going to be reducing. And God did not intend us to take medications. That's my true and honest belief. All right. So I think everybody should recognize this, that we are taking so many pharmaceuticals as children and as adults. So, John, what was the original amount of vaccines that were given to babies like before the 80s? I think just a couple, right?
Gosh, I know about the MMR. There's a whole list of them back when I was a kid, and there's probably more today. Well, and my fear now, and I want you to talk about this now since you brought up vaccines, is I understand the not wanting to force people to take them or else there are consequences. What about the past when we cured, there's no more smallpox?
That's true. And exactly.
Like, people rush to say, they put it in an all box. All vaccines are bad because, where do you stand on that?
I think we got to look at the preparation and work behind it, because I actually did part of my dissertation. I actually looked up the vaccines all the way back to 1776 when we actually had to come up with a smallpox vaccine to beat smallpox, because the American soldiers were not really dying and losing lives at a battle to the British. They are actually dying at high rates of smallpox. But it was a different approach. They did a smallpox inoculation as a vaccine. So if it wasn't for the smallpox vaccine, you and I would not be here today, John. So that's why I always say, hey, it actually saved our life. But when you look at Bill Gates becoming the biggest health spokesperson behind it, I think some people should at least raise an eyebrow, like, all right, can we see from efficacy? Let's see like if it's got long-standing results before making the humans the first guinea pigs. We didn't have a choice back in 1776 because we were about to lose the war. We needed to keep all of our American soldiers alive. But I think it's a lot different than it is today. And I think there's too many influences on vaccines today.
Today is
there was, like polio and whatnot through it. Well,
it's very different today than even in the 60s and 70s.
Yeah, because I think if you're gonna really put anything out on the market for the American public, you have to scrutinize to every possible way to see what can can and what will go wrong and how likely is it to go wrong. You should be doing test subjects of like, like a couple thousand rats before you do a couple humans, but we didn't have any of that. And I think we kind of jumped to it too. And now we're seeing more and more stories about why this, I hate to call it a pandemic. I call it a plandemic, and I was sanctioned by the court. Anyways, like how it came about. And I think there's too many rumors to know exactly what went out. So
we're talking about the current.
Whether it came from the Wu-Tang like
right.
lab or something like that, or whether it came from someone having sex with a bat, who knows? I mean, could have happened. They could have done both.
What people don't talk about, though, maybe you can address this too, is this was very unique. This thing that happened to us in 2019, 2020, something that we hadn't dealt with since, when was it? The pandemic of 2017, right? The flu outbreak that killed so many people. This particular time, so many people died so fast, where they were dying left and right. They had to put them in trucks, refrigerated trucks, that they were trying to find something fast. And I think we went down that road.
Exactly.
This, and then, but people don't talk about that now. They just demonized the vaccine without saying, but this was the environment that caused that. We never had that before. We didn't have that with the small, we didn't do that in the 60s and the 70s.
I think there should be a lot more time spent on why things started happening.
Why, exactly. And we're not talking about that. There's just the demonization of it, and then the politics, and everybody picks a side, and they get angry.
And it created like the largest civil war. And
it's a huge civil war. And people are arguing and debating, and they won't listen, they won't talk, and they pick a side. And it was never like this.
Yeah, it took me 5 years to speak with my brother. And he's a very far left liberal vice principal. I'll just tell you that. But we're finally seeing some shared commonalities, because he's realizing that how much work I'm spending on limiting pharmaceutical companies, and he's got an autistic kid that he's concerned about. And I was like, look, actually, that's a huge development of my research is on autism. Did you know that a ketogenic diet was not developed for people losing weight? It was developed for two different reasons: autism, epilepsy, and autism. Exactly. Right. And back in the 1930s or something like that. I was like, you know what? I got more than a handful of studies that you want to look into, and I can tell you right now that your pediatrician gave your kid some pharmaceuticals that could be really damaging. And I just kind of gave him a huge one. He's like, all right, you're looking to. He's like, I'm not going to kill you as a Republican, but it's so fine. But anyways, one thing I should tell for the record too is that most of my practice is trust litigation. So it's usually probate and trust. It's all dealing with dead people, really. So my dead people aren't my clients, but my clients are the children that are kind of fighting over the parents' money.
Right.
And in LA County, with a very materialistic population over here, you're going to have a lot of brothers and sisters suing each other for their dead parents' money.
Wow.
So very busy practice here. But I've overseen a lot of cases, because I look at death certificates like on a weekly basis. I think I've probably seen maybe 20,000 death certificates. But I also get copies of the person's medical records. I can tell you that I strongly believe I've seen over 50 fraudulent, I want to say not forged, but fraudulent death certificates, because the cause of death was not COVID-19. I've seen someone, they were actually on their deathbed for the past 7 or 8 months for heart failure, and they're like extremely diabetic and obese, and all of a sudden they died, and they're like, oh, he died from COVID. As the mind, I was like, no, I've seen his medical records at Cedars-Sinai, the biggest hospital in LA. I can tell you that person was dying like straightforward for the past like 6 to 8
months. And COVID pushed them over. It exacerbated.
And they're going to say that COVID, but when they focus on that, they were like, okay, COVID was the primary. Right. So this is where it's, I know it's kind of like a double-edged sword, because I'm like, hey, I'm running for Congress, but you shouldn't trust Congress. But I think we need more people in there to start busting chops and to start speaking behalf of the people. Even if you create your own wars within politics, I'm happy to do that, because I think everybody should be focusing on the American public rather than themselves.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And now they're all worried about, oh, they're not personal. Like, if you see me, I really don't care if the person doesn't like me. I'm going to express my opinion, even if it's offensive, but I'll try to make it a little bit more diplomatic. But I don't like to change my opinion. And when I've had a lot of people tell me, like, you shouldn't bash like a lot of pharmaceutical companies, I'm like, what? Either they come in some use. I'm not bashing 100%, but I'm gonna bash maybe 95% of them, because what really diseases have as pharmaceuticals cured in the past, like what, a couple hundred years. Rockefeller is kind of onto something, and people can kind of catch that, right?
Yeah. Yeah. You're running in a November election. Is it this coming November, or is it the one the midterm
so
election?
I'm getting a fresh
The
head start.
midterms, right?
Exactly. So I have to win the primaries first. So I'm going to call myself a California refugee because I go back and forth between Las Vegas and Nevada. I started spending more, and actually I started spending more time in Las Vegas like 6 or 7 years ago, and I actually spent the most time there during the lockdown because California was very restrictive on going into places with masks. And since we're forced to work remotely with a lot of court hearings, I actually still do in-person trials and motion hearings, but a lot of the hearings were held remotely. I'm like, if I'm not allowed to see people for a couple of months, every weekend I just went to my Vegas property. I was like, I just started loving it over there. I was like, I liked a little bit more. It wasn't like, there had some place still kind of requiring mask, but even the law enforcement, when I met some of the Las Vegas Metropolitan PD, they're like, we got bigger things to worry about than someone not wearing a mask. And a lot of them said, we know it's kind of complete bullshit. So, and that's where I was like really drawn onto it. But yeah. But anyways, back to your statement.
All right. So the
primary is next June. I have to win the primary for the Republican Party. And if I'm the Republican candidate, if I win that, then I'll face off Susie Lee in November 2026.
All right. That's who I was going to ask you. Who are you running against?
I think she's been in office for the past 6 years.
And then how are you going to, you're going to stump? You're going to talk. What are you saying to the people when you do this, or have you started that yet?
I've actually built a good rapport. Well, the health community is the biggest one too. Okay. But now that I'm kind of working with the mixed martial arts kind of communities, I'm working with them. It's a huge one in Las Vegas. Fitness communities. So a lot of my friends, they own large fitness facilities. I'm getting operated over there. Okay. But also one of our former Carnivore community members, she actually speaks out for kids who are getting away from, another huge problem is fentanyl overdose. I'm sure you probably see that over on the East Coast too, right, John?
Yes. Oh, yeah.
I've actually personally observed some people dying of fentanyl a lot in LA. And actually one of my clients is a doctor. I have a lot of doctor clients, so I don't hate all doctors. I just hate when they don't think. I tell this to Dr. Shafee. I was like, I just hate when you guys don't think outside the box. And that's why I love Dr. Shafee, Dr. Kiltz, Dr. Baker, Dr. Berry. But anyways, his son was going to medical school and killed himself on fentanyl overdose, and all of his friends killed themselves. I'm like, I'm seeing it. Even though we're getting a little bit more restriction, I think we need to have a huge wake-up call for a lot of the kids because they're getting really addicted to pain medication. So I'm going to be speaking at all the youth centers. I am sponsoring one of the larger high schools over in Las Vegas. And I'm also working out with the senior centers because I don't like the activities. I don't think a lot of the seniors are getting enough activity out in the senior centers. I'm focusing on that. And then a lot of my friends are with the military, with the Nellis Air Force Base. So I've been connected with them to be an honorary for them. Those are my main focuses, but there's a lot of different, education. I'm asking my brother if he can be somewhat bipartisan and get me connected with some of his more schools over there. And I think I want to get more directed because I think one of the biggest concerns, and when we're talking about health for the American people, is health for our future kids. And that's what I'm seeing really decline. The obesity is climbing up at 20% for all children now? It's 42% for adults. It's always more for the adults, but they said it's finally, because I think it was like 18 or 19. I think it just went up to 20%. Yeah. But also, as you probably recognize, the suicide rates for children are going up very fast. So I think we really need to approach the mental health issues too. We needed kids to start being kids again. I like the fact that when you and I were growing up, we didn't have a cell phone on the playground. We basically stayed outside and we'd come. And we wouldn't really come home and go on the computers and do social media 24/7. We maybe watch a funny show, but we'd be outdoors all day.
Absolutely. Went out, built forts, and rode our bicycles.
Yeah, we need to really start focusing on that's the kind of a traditional America that I prefer. Another comment, not completely off topic, but one of my opposing candidates on the Republican Party, he's been in video games his entire life. He's like, I've been in money, I got the most money. He's like, you've been in video games your entire life. That's your entire background. And what good is that really doing for the American public? Someone said I took it too far when like you're creating future pedophiles. Like I was like, no, because most of the people that get detected, they just do something but like keyboard commandos and they do everything online. I'm like, yeah, these are the kind of people I kind of get a little weird growing up because they don't know how to socialize.
Right,
I don't like the fact that you're trying to teach our kids to stay indoors and play video games all day. I don't think that's good for everybody. Yeah, no, I'm not going to ban all video games and all that, but I like to encourage more of our traditional use standards. We need to get kids outside now. The vitamin D levels are probably plummeting. I could probably pull some research on that, but I think we can probably see that vitamin D decrease in that.
Well, the same incorrect message about cholesterol, fat, about sunlight is still out there. Don't put the sunscreen on. Put the sunscreen on. Wear a hat. Wear sunglasses. Don't get any sun. It's prevalent. We're hearing the echo of the lie now. The lie's over with. We keep hearing it over and over and over again.
And I've heard more than one person. I've never really got I used to get sunburned a little bit, but I'm Italian, so I've got that olive oil skin, so I can get out in the sun for hours. That's why I kind of like Vegas, because I stay out in the sun for like an hour. It's 117 degrees.
Well, yeah.
But it's really easy. But I'm like, hey, I get a really good tan really quick, and I don't get burned. But I've been, even people with very light, like you have lighter color skin, like some very lighter color skin. When they stop taking seed oils, they stop getting sunburn. I'd like to see more research on this. Let's get like a whole couple hundred people, very light skin. Let's measure their pigment to have. I think there's a certain scale on their pigment, and let's have them have no seed oils, and then we'll have a placebo or like another group take the seed oils, no medications whatsoever, and they'll spend the same amount of time like they'll outside every day for at least like 1 or 2 months. And let's see who gets sunburned, or let's check their skin. I can guarantee you the seed oils, based on what I'm hearing.
Absolutely. Yeah. I don't know how long it would take. No, it takes a long time to get the seed oils out of our system.
Yeah.
So I don't know if the half-life is like 4 years. So
here's the other thing. How do you expedite it? Kind of like binders, kind of like how you control their system?
I don't think you can. I think you just have to time it out. Just don't have it.
And serious
it's not like lead. It's not like you can chelate it out. It's not a toxin like lead. It is a toxin, but it's embedded into our fat cells. And so when we regenerate our skin sloughs off, and it's being regenerated with this kind of it's from seed oil substrate instead of healthy animal fat substrate. We're an animal. We should be eating animal fat. And we need studies like that. Who's going to pay for these studies though? Right.
Well, you know what? Our tax dollars, if we don't spend $50 million on condoms, I think we should have some. Who knows what was really used for? I know. And someone said like transgender surgeries on frogs, and they're like, it's transgenic. I'm like, whatever. There's a lot. Just here's a.
I know the money.
We have a lot of money that should be.
There's a lot of wasted. Absolutely.
Let's get more money focusing on the American health. Let's get that. Okay. Because you and I know that we can prove that a ketogenic diet can, especially an animal-based ketogenic diet, can prove so many benefits for the American people. And meat should not be demonized. In dietary fat, one thing I'll tell you right now, one thing I love is raw bone marrow. I think that's the most soothing thing for my gut, if you get it from a quality source. And I started feeling a lot better when I started doing raw bone marrow, because Dr. Clemens recommended the raw fat, like suet and like raw bone marrow.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, you know what? My GI is feeling amazing right now. It's not just from eating.
All right, let's go back to that now. I'm curious because your intestines have been redone, and now you're eating properly and you feel better, but yet you're constructed differently. Everything's flowing perfectly.
Yeah, I would say one thing I have to do regularly is if I'm sitting or if I'm traveling too much, the scar tissue, because even though if you look at the outside, by the way, I spent just to remove all the scar tissue, I did like exosomes, PRP, ultrasound, shockwave therapy.
That much.
I have a local chiropractor friend that he does like an ultrasound shockwave on me. Like it basically just, because if I don't massage, because the problem with a lot of scar tissue is that it's almost impossible to completely eliminate, because your body naturally creates scar tissue as a mechanism to kind of like bind things together as a healing mechanism. But when you cut your vortex like in half, basically, you got all these nerves and everything that wants to realign. So my lower abdomen, if I'm sitting or if I'm flying for too long, it get when your hip flexors get tight, that gets tight. So I have to spend more time massaging and breaking that up. I don't have any blockages, but I just remember sometimes it's kind of uncomfortable.
Can you do it while you're sitting on the airplane, or do you have to get up?
I usually, instead of like me massage my pelvis in front of everybody else. I wait until
I didn't think of that. That's where it is.
Yeah, I gotta wait.
It's not going to look good.
Yeah, wait up to get
Look
off
what
the
the
plane.
congressman's doing over there.
Yeah, exactly. I gotta be careful, especially on a campaign.
Right.
It's like, oh, he was just rubbing himself for the plane ride for 6 hours over to Boston. I watched him the entire time. It's gonna look great for the campaign.
But other than the scar tissue, your movement is regular
I
and
think,
normal and healthy, and you feel great.
A lot more things competitive wise. The one thing I realize is that when you get older, I still have the strength. I still can have somewhat the stamina. The recovery just sucks getting older. That's part of life. I just know that I get sore a little easier. But yeah, I'm feeling a lot better, and that's why I'm kind of pushing to finish off my PhD, is because I had like really bad brain fog after they cut my intestines open and all the pharmaceuticals that I couldn't like really function. I actually like reduced my workload because I just remember like while I was taking the medications before and after surgery, I couldn't work efficiently. I could not handle too many clients at once. But now I'm practicing law and handling things in 3 different states, and running a campaign, and actually mostly on myself because my manager is taking care of a family member, and I'm still competing, and I'm doing if you ever want to watch, I have a bull riding contest in Fort Worth, my first bull riding contest.
Wow, seriously.
There's no bull riding trainers. I had to find a specialized one, and there's no one on the West Coast, so I had to find it as closest as Colorado. So I'm going to fly out to him on Labor Day weekend, do professional bull riding training, and then Fort Worth. So we're going to have a Fort Worth meetup on the September 27th. I'm going to co-host it with some people over there, and we're going to watch me ride a bull afterwards. And
so we're going to add bull riding to your list of all the wonderful things, you do.
Backflips,
And you're young. You're an amazing guy. You're fascinating.
You know what? For 40, age should not define you. You should define your age, because the person that inspired me to be a personal trainer was almost 70.
Oh.
He was 68, and I still actually speak with him today because he just turned 88. Because I met him in 2005, right when I started becoming a personal trainer. But he had a better body and better fit, and he had a better kind of like mood than any other 20-year-old like in the gym. And you're seeing like all these girls, like even like the college girls, like, God, who's that? Oh, that guy's ripped.
Wow.
But he was all natural, and I still speak with my friend Jerry today because he just turned 88, and I just still wish him. But that proves that it's how you treat yourself. That's going to be your real age.
It is. All right. One last question as we're running to the top of the hour. What is your message to those who have lost trust in the system?
You know what? I was disagreeing with Dr. Kiltz on this, but I'm actually going to have to agree with him. Your best resource is not going to be the government. Your best resource is going to be your close community member. But I think we need to expand the community, and we need to limit the government from manipulating the community, because the community was what helped me find my healing. I mean, I would never even found about the carnivore diet. People didn't start speaking up and talking about how they got healed. Those testimonials are more powerful than anything. So if you're having trouble, if you're struggling and you're having certain problems or not, maybe you should take a second guess of what your doctor, you don't have to say my doctor is completely wrong, but I want you to research behind that. Research everything that he's recommending, but then also listen to these couple million testimonials, if anything, right now. That should be a wake-up call. And I guarantee you, if you have any type of condition, there's got to be at least one other person that resolved that condition with their carnivore-based ketogenic diet.
Absolutely. I listen to and read the comments on people's videos and stories, Dr. Barry, and there's so many issues, and people are finding solutions by reading other people's answers. And you're absolutely right. Community is so powerful and strong, and trust your instincts, not just the government. Do your own research. We have the internet. We have everything in the palm of our hands.
That's where social media can come.
That's where we should use it.
Exactly.
And use it wisely.
And actually, and that's why I like your Healing Humanity shirt too, because I actually started
carrying
5 or 6 of them. And I'm going to go to the Columbus, Ohio.
And
then they actually may co-host the Fort Worth one with me. And then I'm hosting one in Reno. So actually, even though I'm spending times with the military, law enforcement, senior centers, high schools, I'm making the carnivore community, I'm keeping that community with me during this campaign.
Excellent. And with that, we're going to end this. And I want you to tell the people who are listening where they can find you,
Sure.
all about your campaign, just, our community as well. I mean,
Yeah.
who are you? Like before Chris Brandlin, I didn't know who you were for a little while. And then I'm like, let me find out about this guy. Oh, look, he's all over the place. Oh, he's running for Congress. Tell us.
Yes. Well, hey, just a statement. I was never much on social media until this last year. Before that, I was on LinkedIn for 14 years as an attorney who liked a lot of offensive humor. I just got permanently banned. It could be my last time because I think it's permanent this time. So I migrated on Facebook, Instagram, X, started a YouTube channel. I started to put more videos. I started doing those reels, as you probably saw, John. But my main website for the campaign is chrisbrandlin.com. We're going to have information on the meetups too. So I'm going to put the Fort Worth one. I'm going to put the Reno one that we're going to host in October. And then I'm going to host another large one in Vegas. If you want to find me for I always invite all the carnivore community, because even though I'm licensed in mainly, California and Texas with limited practice in Nevada, there's a lot of practice areas where you don't really need an attorney license in that specific state. And there's a lot of federal issues too, is that you can find me at brandlinlaw.com. And I handle 13 different practice areas. I just try to stay away from family law and criminal defense because those always bring a lot of problems. But anybody can find me anywhere. And I go back and forth between LA and Las Vegas. And I always invite everybody, if they want to visit me in Las Vegas, I'll pay for your jump off the stratosphere with me.
All right.
There you go.
Take you up. I haven't been out there in a while.
The strat jump is fun. It's good. It's as high as the Eiffel Tower, too.
Yeah. All right. Thank you. Stay on. I want to talk to you after this is over. Everybody, hit the like button. Check out Chris Brandlin at chrisbrandlin.com and brandlinlaw.com. And if you're a Nevadian, is that how they say it? Nevadian? Nevadan. Consider voting for Chris. Absolutely. In the midterms. All right. Take it easy, everybody. Have a good day.